Hi there, welcome to my views and news. Is there any real threat of an imminent war between Ethiopia and Somalia? I wanted to analyze this question. Luckily, I got some time today. Is there just flexing of military muscles on Ethiopian side, on Somalia's side, or war is imminent? Is Horn of Africa on the verge of a broad regional war? These are very important questions because I think that the tension in the Horn of Africa between two countries is being underestimated. I've been covering Horn for the last around 5 years. I had never seen in the last 5 years such level of military tension between two countries. I never saw threat of a war as pronounced as now between two Horn of Africa countries in the last 4 to 5 years. Last year, when PM Abiy delivered a speech, his historic speech when he tried to prove Ethiopian case for access to sea. After that, we saw military movements on Ethiopia Eritrea border. Back then, several news outlets, several journalists, YouTubers said that war was imminent between Ethiopia and Eritrea. Regular viewers know that I disagreed with all those reports. I said no war was imminent. Yes, small scale military movement was happening, but basically no war was imminent. I cannot say the same now about Ethiopia Somalia tension. Question is, do Ethiopia and Somalia really want a war? It's a very interesting situation. I think both the countries don't want a war, but they are being pushed towards a war. Unknowingly, they're pushing themselves towards a war while they don't want a war. Does it make sense? It makes sense for me, I think. What about the Somalia does not want a war. It is already fighting an internal war insurgency for years. It has lots of its political issues. It can ill afford any large military escalation. Ethiopia just out of a war. Just 2 years ago, it signed Pretoria, warlike situation in Amhara. Ethiopia does not want a war as well. But the problem is that the two countries have taken extreme positions on some issues. These extreme positions are pushing them towards a war. Ethiopia wants access to sea no matter what happens. Ethiopia willing to recognize Somaliland as a country. Somalia says that it can put the fight against Al Shabaab on the back burner, but it won't let Ethiopia recognize Somaliland as a country. It won't let Ethiopia build a naval base in Somaliland. Extreme positions. No middle ground found. Talks failed. So, unknowingly, the two countries are being pushed towards a war, I would say. Question is, what about other leaders, other players? Do they want a war? They're not just two players in this conflict. In most of regional conflicts, there are several players. I said Ethiopia, Somalia don't want a war, but they're being pushed towards war because of their extreme positions. What about Americans? They're in Somalia conducting a strikes here. They are Somalia's partner against Al Shabaab. Do they want a war here? No. They know if war erupts, Al Shabaab would be one of the major beneficiaries. What about Turkey? Does it want a war between Ethiopia and Somalia? No. Why? Because Turkey would find it difficult to create a balance between its relations with Ethiopia and Somalia. It does not want to take sides. That is why it is mediating. It has hosted two rounds of talks between the two sides. What about UAE? UAE wants to protect its interests. If a war breaks out, UAE won't mind, but it wants its interests to be protected. What about Egypt? Egypt wants to put pressure upon Ethiopia, whether it's through war or not. It does not matter. Egypt arming Somalia, sending troops to Somalia, trying to corner Ethiopia. Maybe a war suits Egyptian interests. Al Shabaab, definitely. War would facilitate Al Shabaab in expanding its reach, in reaching out to the people to find more recruits, to get more weapons. What about other players in the region? Djibouti. Djibouti wants to stop Ethiopia from gaining access to sea through Somaliland, no matter what happens. Because if Ethiopia diverts all its cargo from Djibouti to other ports in the countries, Djibouti's economy will take a serious dent. If a war breaks out between Ethiopia and Somalia, perhaps Ethiopian attempt to gain access to sea through Somaliland will fail. You can imagine what Djibouti wants. Eritrea, proxy war. Eritrea is Somalia's defense partner. It does not want to take on Ethiopia directly, but if Somalia-Ethiopia war breaks out, Eritrea would be in a position to back Somalia against Ethiopia. Sudan, it's fighting an internal civil war. I don't think Kenyans want a war right now between Ethiopia and Somalia. So, when it comes to the point of view of parties, players in this conflict, they're divided. Some want war, others are against war. There are two main deciding factors which will determine the course of this conflict, which can definitely turn into a war. Again, I'm saying that's my analysis. It's not based on any information from inside, it's purely an analysis. Situation is definitely progressing towards breakout of a war. Two deciding factors. Firstly, Ethiopia Somaliland final agreement. If it happens, if Ethiopia recognizes Somaliland as a country, it would be a big provocation. 2 days ago, Somalia's Minister of Foreign Affairs, State Minister, in an interview to Al Jazeera, said that if Ethiopia signs a final agreement with Somaliland, it will be declaration of war. That is why Ethiopia is hesitant. It's not making this big decision. The first deciding factor is final agreement if it is signed between Ethiopia and Somaliland. Second deciding factor is the movement of Egyptian military towards Ethiopian border. Ethiopian troops, which are part of African Union peacekeeping mission, will have to leave Somalia. Where are these troops deployed? African Union peacekeeping mission called ATMOS troops are deployed to 6 sectors in Somalia. Sector 1 is Banadir, Mogadishu area. Sector 2 is Jubba, Shabelle. Sector 3, where Ethiopian, in Sector 1, Banadir, Mogadishu, there is mainly Ugandan military. In Sector 2, Shabelle, there is Kenyan military, part of African Union peacekeeping mission. In Sector 3, there is Ethiopian National Defense Force deployed. Sector 3 consists of Bay, Bakul, Gaidu. Bay and Bakul are in southwest state, Gaidu is in Jubaland. So the troops, if all ENDF troops, part of ATMOS, have to leave Somalia, it means that Ethiopian troops in Bay, Bakul, Gaidu will have to leave. Sector 4 is Heran, Gulmudug regional state. Here too, Ethiopian National Defense Force troops deployed. Djibouti's troops were deployed here as well. Heran, Gaidu, Bay, Bakul. Here, ENDF troops are part of African Union transition mission. There is more deployment of ENDF troops under bilateral arrangements too in southwest state in Bay Bakul, but there is ATMOS deployment of ENDF troops too in Bay Bakul, Gaidu, and Heran. Ethiopian troops, part of ATMOS, will have to leave Somalia. When? By the end of this year. And when they leave, who will replace them? Egyptian troops. If Egyptian troops start advancing towards Ethiopian border and try to enter Gaidu, Bay, Bakul, Iran, will Ethiopia accept that? No. That is why Ethiopian troops are taking control of or consolidating their control of airstrips on Somalia-Ethiopia border. They have taken control of 4 main airstrips in Bakul in the last few days. They were there, by the way. It's not something new. They are consolidating their control. They don't want Egyptian troops to come here. By the way, so far, Somalia's government has not confirmed the arrival of Egyptian military. They have only confirmed the arrival of Egyptian weapons. They've confirmed that Somalia has acquired munitions, arms from Egypt. But they have not confirmed the arrival of Egyptian military. But sources say that Egyptian commandos have arrived in Somalia. Somalia is not disclosing that because Somalia wants quick deployment of Egyptian military to some regional states which are close to Ethiopian border. That is why we're seeing mobilization of Ethiopian military across the border into Somalia and in Soma region of Ethiopia. These are two deciding factors, I would believe. Ethiopia, Somaliland, final agreement, movement of Egyptian military. If Somalia tries to accelerate the deployment of Egyptian military towards Ethiopian border, it could be a big escalation. Same is the case with Ethiopia signing agreement, final agreement with Somaliland. So we can some of yours that the threat of a war between Ethiopia and Somalia is very real. It's not exaggerated. Rather, I believe it is being underestimated. I have not seen any international intervention so far, but it's very surprising for me. What is the world waiting for? Is it waiting for a war to break out before intervening to stop it? The war that prevented, not stopped. This is the time to intervene. I believe situation is alarming. I'm not saying that tonight war is going to break out, but all the developments happening indicate that the things are progressing towards direct military escalation between Ethiopia and Somalia. Thank you for watching.